Welcome back. Israel's prime minister insists he has caught Iran in the big lie and that it is time for President Trump to rip up the Obama-era nuclear deal.
The deal that everybody's talking about was premised on the fact that Iran had no such material. It's not just in the minds of people whom they have. It's the actual calculations that they've done, the blueprints, the measurements. They kept it hidden because they don't want the world to know what I showed yesterday.
Yesterday, the prime minister had a lengthy slide presentation, but it included no evidence that Iran is currently violating the agreement. And listen here to Michael Hayden. He's the former CIA director, the former deputy director of national intelligence. He says Netanyahu had new details, yes, but that his presentation seemed much more a political ploy than an intelligence breakthrough.
Credit to the Israeli intelligence service for getting this trove of documents and digital records. But I think all it does, Chris, is give more detail to the plot line that we all knew, that we all agreed. To the best of my knowledge, out of government, not getting the briefings, I think this is fundamentally old news. And look, with all due respect to the prime minister, I realize he's not an intelligence source, all right?
Olivier Knox of SiriusXM joins us now. Michael Hayden's point seems to be the government of France put out a lengthy statement. They seem to agree in much more polite terms. The Prime Minister Netanyahu, yes, had a lot of details that Iran lied and lied for a long time about what it was doing and the depth and the scope of its nuclear program. But everybody knew that. They just didn't have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. But that his main message was to try to give a political argument cover to President Trump. Rip it up.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the Prime Minister is in trouble politically at home. He needs to get this. He's been calling for the United States to tear up, to back away from this agreement for a long time. He needs this. He's making the argument after the leaders of France and Germany came through Washington, D.C., met with President Trump and urged him to keep it. There are some new dimensions to this. There have always been questions of what we're calling the pre-existing activities, the intent to develop nuclear weapons. So there's a little bit of new stuff here, but it's not new to American intelligence or French intelligence or British intelligence. Recently, both the current Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and the Defense Secretary, Jim Mattis, have said that Iran is complying with the agreement, with the nuclear agreement, which seems to be more salient even than General Hayden's remarks.
Even in the way that Netanyahu rolled this out, you could see that his was an audience of one almost. This was done in a televised address. He had charts, he had graphics. We know that that is something that Trump's own advisors use when they're trying to sell him a lot of visual aids. He's doing television interviews now to bolster his point with American networks. So, much of this seems to be about positioning himself as Trump makes this decision. And he did it probably in a way that was fairly effective, coming off the heels of these visits, just knowing the way that Trump responds to intelligence.
To that point, the president was in the Rose Garden yesterday with the president of Nigeria, and he said that he had watched some of Prime Minister Netanyahu's presentation, and the president already, and now in addition, after listening to Prime Minister Netanyahu, seems to be leaning into the idea of walking away.
No, I think it sends the right message. In 7 years, that deal will have expired, and Iran is free to go ahead and create nuclear weapons. That's not acceptable. And I've been saying that's happening. They're not sitting back idly. They're setting off missiles, which they say are for television purposes. I don't think so. I think, if anything, what's happening today and what's happened over the last little while and what we've learned has really shown that I've been 100% right.
May 12th being the operative deadline. All indications are go?
Yeah, I mean, look, the president's been coy about it, saying repeatedly, you all think you know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do, but wink, wink, nod, nod, I'm pulling out of the deal. I don't know anybody who thinks that he's going to move in another direction right now. The conversations with Macron talking about some type of perhaps side deal or a new deal that wouldn't actually rip up the JCPOA, I think there's no time for that. And to be fair, from my understanding, and Olivier and Julia and Abby would know better than me, but there have been legitimate efforts behind the scenes to try and figure out a pathway forward, negotiators between the European countries and the United States. I think time is the issue here, and the president has kind of a very clear state of mind on this one. I think the most interesting element, beside the Mossad operation and the details of that when it came to actually getting the documents and the disks that were laid out yesterday, is just the strategy behind it. Getting the last word here in the wake of Merkel, in the wake of Macron, making sure that you are the last one to talk to the president before he decides to make this decision, a decision that he feels very comfortable, I think, in his current place. I think the big question now is what it all means, because the idea, you had the IAEA come out this morning and say there is no current nuclear program in Iran. The idea has always been, and the Prime Minister's point has always been, that in the wake of 10 years, or after this deal ends in 10 years, with all of this know-how, that they could just restart it. And if you keep that as kind of the baseline premise, and that's your reason to pull out of the deal, then the president has all the information that he needs to stay in it. And if that's his viewpoint, then he gets out. I think the big question everybody has now is what happens after May 12th if he gets out.
Just building on that, what does tear up the Iran nuclear deal mean for Donald Trump?
Right.
What does backing out mean for Donald Trump? Does it mean a Rose Garden event in which he says, I'm quitting the Iran deal, full stop? Does it mean that he will actually, that the administration will punish European, Chinese, Russian, and other companies that do business in Iran? You know, people think that he's pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He hasn't. That doesn't happen until 2020. Right. And so there are elements of what this means as a definitional matter. What does it mean to tear it up? What does it mean to walk away? If you listen to the French, they don't seem like they think he's going to say, okay, if you're a French company doing business in Iran, you're now cut off from the American financial system. That could always happen, but that's one of the big questions I have going forward.
Right, like anything. What he says is one thing, and then the details of what the administration does in response to what he says is another follow. Again, May 12th is the deadline.